We'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone. My name is Alejandra Arguelles. I'm one of the program coordinators at the Ideas Center. Welcome to today's WISE session. Today we have a great panelists prepared for you all that will be speaking to the experience of first-gen students or even being the first in your family to be an engineer in industry. So I want to go ahead and start off with one of our panelists, Veronica Cuevas. The question, just introductions and then what industry you're in.
Hello, so my name is Veronica Cuevas. I actually grew up here in San Diego on South Bay County, in National City. I went to Sweetwater High, so I'm an alumni there. I went to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, where I actually did aerospace engineering. But since I grew up here and I knew of solar turbines, that's where I currently work at. That was kind of where I'm at now. I've been there for like 8 years as an engineering process lead. Kind of the picture in my background is kind of what we do, industrial turbines. They're pretty big. You can pretty much walk through them. That's how big they are. So I'm happy to be here.
And then Steven.
Hey, that's like pretty awesome image back there. Sounds like an awesome job. So hey, hello everyone, I'm Steven. I work for ServiceNow, which is a company that helps enterprises digitize their workflows. And my role there is I'm a senior director of quality engineering and performance, and I help manage teams across the globe, essentially 7 different engineering sites. I actually am a San Diego native as well, so I grew up in Oceanside, which is not too far away from the campus, and I'm just excited to be here. So thank you for the opportunity.
And then Karina.
Hi everyone, my name's Karina, and I graduated from UCSD in 2018 with a degree in electrical engineering, and I've been working at Cubic since for about 3 years. And right now I work as a software developer in test. So basically I create software that tests software. And yeah, so some of the products that we work on are like the bus system in the New York City Metro. Like when you tap to pay, that's kind of one of the devices that we work on, or the like the passes to ride around on the Metro. And yeah, my parents are from, like my dad's from Mexico and my mom is from El Salvador. So first gen, first time to college, and I made it out alive. So happy to be here and share my experience.
Now that our panelists have introduced themselves, I do have a list of questions that I'll be asking them, but I do encourage our audience to ask any questions within the Q&A or be active in the chat if you have any questions for specific panelists as we go through this next session. So what was it like being the first in your family to go to college, or to be the first in your family to be an engineer? Veronica.
So for me, it was scary just to leave. It was a lot at first. I was the first to go to college and then the first for engineering, period. And so, like I said, I went to San Luis Obispo. At this time in my life, the farthest up north I ever been was LA. And so it was a lot to get used to. And I think it's just what it's different, it is different, and you just kind of have to go and be there. It's kind of hard because also my parents are Mexican, so they couldn't really speak, still to this day, they don't really speak well English. So it wasn't really like someone I can go and ask for help. A lot of the times you see yourself that you're gonna have to take initiative and just do it and find the answers. And at that time, there was no cell phones, no GPS. You gotta print out the map and just go and kind of be more of a leader and tell your parents, like, this is where you're taking me, this is where you're dropping me off. So it was just a change, and from becoming like your parents telling you everything to now like you telling your parents. So it's different.
And Steven?
Yeah, hey, so for me, my father actually went to UCSD. So he graduated there with political science degree. For me, it was a little bit different, right? I went to school for engineering after I got out of the military. So I spent 4 years in the military, got out, and I wanted to be an engineer. And that was a challenge. It's like there was no one in my family, that had that background. And so, it was hard to find, a connection with people that could give me advice, make recommendations to me, just network and kind of give me that motivation to finish and to complete, the education that's required to do the job, because the job is it's a very challenging job. It's a very rewarding job, but that was just motivation that had to come from inside, right? And so I think that kind of translates across some of these stories that we're talking about. Is just trying to find dig into this and push through, muscle your way through, because there is light at the end of the tunnel. And for me, I absolutely found it. I'm like super happy about the career choice that I have, and I have no regrets. I think all of those, being the first to do these things, it's the badge that we get to wear on our shirt, on our chest, right? We get to wear that. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, hopefully the first, but not the last. And then as for me, being the first, definitely resonate with what they said before. I think it's also like a culture shock. It's like a language shock, just like all these new things you're learning, but then you can't really go back to your home base, and kind of they can't really help you because you're in this new little bubble. So yeah, it was definitely scary, like not having the same resources. Like I could tell my mom and my dad, but they wouldn't understand anything I was talking about. Yeah, and then it's also like feels like a double-edged sword, because like you'll come back from college like on a holiday or something, and then you tell some family members, but then they think that you think you're better than them because you're going to college, but then you're like, but this is for the raza, like we're all moving up. So it's kind of like tricky to navigate, because you're like, I'm not trying to be better, I just want to make everyone better, like in our community. So there's a lot of layering to, like it has its pros, but I'm just talking about all the new and kind of scary things to deal with.
Thank you, Karina. For those of you who joined a little bit later after our introductions, I just went ahead and put in the chat who our panelists are. For the next question, and then as a reminder, please ask any questions that you have. For the next question, it is, tell us about your journey and what you think helped you succeed in becoming an engineer with the industry you are in now. Veronica.
Yeah, so my journey was pretty bumpy. Like Karina said, like it was kind of hard to get used to. And like we've been saying, like it's a lot of the first, and not only like going to college engineering, but like learning a lot of things, even just applying to financial aid and asking your parents like for the FAFSA and like tax returns and learning how to do that for them. And, I think for me, when I graduated high school, I was your stereotypical straight A student, 4.0. And so when I got there, it was kind of like a reality check. I was struggling, and that made me embarrassed. And so I had a hard time asking for help. And so it's kind of like, I didn't want to not let my family down because, I tried so hard to get here. At the same time, because I felt so out of place, because the kids or the students around me, a lot of them were already second, third generation college students. I just felt I didn't belong. And so the fact that I wasn't performing how I was used to, it like got to me. And so, I did go through a struggle. Eventually I asked for help. I ended up and saying like, I need help, I will graduate. Like, I can't just do it on my own. And that's when I started joining clubs. I joined SHEP, which is like the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers. And I think that for me was my savior. I met friends. That's when like I felt normal, like, oh, it's not me, it's everyone. Okay, like we're all in this together, we're all struggle, we're all miss home. And so it took me a while to kind of get over the hump, but once I made those friends, I made those connections, I started asking for help. I started, making your study groups and not being embarrassed to say like, I don't get it. Can you tell me again, and maybe again and again, and be okay with that. But that also makes you a lot stronger. Now I can see it in my job work, in my workforce. I see it even with other friends that I know who also have engineering backgrounds. Like I can tell that I outperform because I am so used to, I got like that grit in me where it's like, no, you just keep asking, you keep going and you do it. And so it turns into a positive once you create that for you.
Yeah, I guess I'll go next. My journey was, after the military, as I mentioned earlier, I made that, that big decision to go into the engineering field. And I knew what I was doing was pretty bold. Like it was kind of like an ambitious, goal for myself, right? I knew that it was going to be tough, and I wanted that. I was, seeking that challenge. It was probably a little bit tougher than even I had imagined it would be for part of the way there. And a lot of that had to do with, when you get out of the military, I didn't have a job, right? So it's like I'm going to school, but like, I'm a grown man. My family's not here to take care of me. They can't pay my rent, so these are things that, I had to juggle going to school, and practically having a full-time job. It's like, it's tough, right? So had to make a lot of sacrifices of like how I spent my time. Like, can I go to all these classes all at the same time? Can I take 6 classes so I can finish school early so I can, be a productive member of the workforce? Just kind of balancing these things out. And, I had some successes during doing that. And I also had some failures, but in the failure, I just had those hard check-ins with myself about like, okay, I've miscalculated on this, I need to adjust and move forward. Right. So, tried to also build, networks of people that, just help motivate you along the way. And then also some periods of time where, I spent, time by myself, just trying to reflect and trying to understand who I was and what I was trying to do, and just constantly, remembering, tying things back to that ambitious goal that I had, right? And I like to call it the North Star. Like, what was the one thing I was trying to do? Even though it's a little fuzzy, it's like there's some goal that you're trying to get through. So for me, yeah, it was a lot of juggling, classes, juggling, jobs in between. But I felt like, through that, journey, it built a lot of resilience. And in hindsight, it's like, that was the only way that made sense for me, it's like, and I think one of the lessons for me is really just, I wish I would have enjoyed the journey, a little bit more while I was going through it, as opposed to like when I'm done with that phase, right? Try to enjoy the journey as you're going through it.
And then for me, it was my journey. Like, yeah, I also feel the same. I think in the beginning, I blame myself for a lot of things. Like if I wasn't doing well in my classes, or if I wasn't asking enough questions, or if I was too scared, like it's my fault, it's me. But then as you learn about like history and like the systematic oppression that like we're like, especially if you're a minority or something like that, there's certain resources that you didn't have or your parents didn't have or before. So it's like, it's not my fault. I like that it is that I have the resources that I have. It's not my fault. I'm coming to terms with like, I'm just going to do the best that I can and it's going to work itself out, versus before I'm like, oh, I'm letting down everybody. I'm letting down my family if I didn't do something wrong, or if I did something wrong. Yeah, and I think something that helped with that was SHIP. I also joined SHIP. It helped me a lot. I think just being around other people that look like me and they were succeeding in their classes and they were good students. I'm like, oh, okay. Like I was just trying to rub bubbles with them so that some of their like good study skills, and I would go, like I wouldn't go to office hours by myself. I'm like, okay, I'll go with you if you go. Because I was just so scared for who knows what reason. So finding people like friends that are good at the classes and know like what to do, and you're like, okay, I'm just gonna try to keep up with you and we're gonna keep going. And like, yeah, finding that family at school was really helpful for me.
Steven, were you part of any organizations in undergrad?
No, I mean, I think I got recruited a couple of times to join different programs, and it was, I just didn't have, with what I had going on, like I would have just crushed myself trying to sign up for more than what I had already bit off more than I could chew by like having almost a full-time job during most of my undergrad, and then just trying to pay the bills, keep the lights on in my apartment. So the thought crossed my mind, and I think if you can make that happen, I definitely encourage it. Maybe a couple of regrets around that, but yeah, for me it was it was a tall order.
Yeah,
already.
those pay.
It was a tall order, but certainly interacting and networking during that time was important for me. Like I did make specific investments of time to like connect with people and go to meetups and check things out. I was probably less committal in the full program, but I did network and interact, and I think that's absolutely essential. Like you just get a flood of information, and it doesn't always make sense when you first hear the information. You're trying to digest it and try to process it, and it's sometimes like a month later, 6 months later, where the light bulb will go off because of something that someone mentioned in one of the programs or one of the other networking events. And so I do encourage everyone to try to get involved in whatever capacity that you can, and that you can manage your time. I do advise to do that. I think it is a good thing.
I think I wanted to add, your experience speaks to whether it's a transfer student who has other responsibilities at home and isn't able to get as involved. So then it's still, what can you do within your capacity? Because sometimes our student leaders overcommit themselves. So then your advice is also very much helpful for our students. So my next question here is, what were some of the unique challenges you faced as a first generation student engineer, first engineer in your family? How did you overcome them? Veronica.
Yes, so I think just touching again back to the things, it's like you already have in your head that everything is different. That's already, and you kind of understand when you go like, oh, I'm first to go to college, so that's you kind of accept that. But then what was more shocking, it's like language. I didn't know how much, my native tongue is Spanish, and I didn't realize how much Spanish I spoke. So it was very hard for me even to express myself. Like I remember I wanted to say like, oh yeah, la, la. I want to say like, oh, how cool. But I was just like, how cool, I guess. Like it was very hard for me to express myself. So that was different. And even like, I didn't realize like how vocabulary changes. And like, it could be something so simple, but it went back to like, oh, it's me. I'm not to level, like words, like static or dynamics, whatever. It's like, I know what that means. And I'm like, I need to look at it in the dictionary. Like these are real words. These are not like what a class is called, or even just like resources. Like a lot of the kids already knew what the software was, like MATLAB, Creo. And they were like, oh, I did that in my high school. My class had, or my high school had that. And I'm like, what? I didn't even have that in my high school. And so like, it's like the subconscious things that you keep adding to yourself of why, at least for me, like, I don't know if I should be here. Maybe they made a fluke. Because you already kind of have that for being first generation. You didn't see someone in your family do it. So you kind of feel, at least for me, I already feel out of place. So it's just like adding more and more to it. And also like the financials, right? So it's like, I remember I would have to work and go to school, and I didn't have enough to buy 1089. And I was just like, man, everybody has one. And I'm over here like asking my friends, hey, can I borrow it for the test? I mean, eventually I got one, but like, it just adds to it. But you become really resourceful. So even though it sounds so bad, like it really is an asset at the end, because you figure out how to make your money work. You figure out how to get the stuff done. And then it really, you say like, I got it done. And I'm still competing at your level with less things. So, you know, so at the end of the day, it does become an asset. And like I said, it kind of takes a while. You probably will see it once you get into the workforce, how that like competitive and not giving up attitude makes a difference, because when you go home, you're just with your family. But once you go in the workforce and you put your output, your work, and you start seeing everybody around you, you say like, yeah, I belong, I'm here, I made it. So it is a good asset that you ended up getting from all that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll add to that, right? Like for me, on the academic side, I struggled in a couple of areas, right? And when you're going to school for computer science, you know, one of the things that didn't fully cross my mind before I kind of jumped into it was like how much math, you know, I was gonna have to do. Like, and math just like totally thrapped. Like I got my butt kicked with math. And I remember, you know, being an idiot and telling my professor, one of my math professors one time, like, hey, I'm just trying to pass this class. You know, I used that language, you know, with him, and, you know, he gave me a C-, you know, like, so it's like, oh, now I'm going to have to take this class, you know, again. Right. And it was, you know, I was, you know, like just math was just one of the areas that I had to just spend that extra time on and stay up late at night or go to, you know, the office hours to get, you know, multiple tutoring sessions. And, you know, the second time around, some of those things, they just click, you know, more, but that was definitely something that, you know, I ran into and I had to overcome. And, you know, another big one was like, you know, just talking about like time management, you know, just like, you know, you have to be in all these different places, you know, all at once. It feels like, how do you navigate this? And, you know, for me, I learned that I have to plan, you know, I have to like look at a week before what I'm supposed to do and write it down and put it on the calendar and, you know, give myself these reminders, you know, to how I'm going to spend my day and my time. Okay, you got to remember to eat or block out your time for your lunch, or you got to remember that, you know, you got to pay your bills at this time, you know. So I had to like just block out time, you know, for time management and to make sure that I was being efficient, and then, you know, block out time to like relax and enjoy yourself and to connect with your family, because those things are super important. You know, there's probably some other challenges I ran into, but this call's being recorded, so I'm not going to talk about all of those, right? I'm just joking. So yeah, I mean, for me, it was a lot of it on the math and academic side, and then just, you know, struggling and kind of muscling my way through certain courses that just gave me a hard time, because I thought being an engineer was like, oh yeah, I just get to write code all day and I don't need to know about this class or that class. And I was kind of wrong about that for many reasons, but more importantly, like as I've joined the career force and built my career, there's a lot of those things where it's like, it has come back where it's like, wow, I didn't think I needed this information, but like the conversation in this meeting that we're having is, we're talking about a math thing, and it shows up and it reveals itself in very interesting ways. But if you're really paying attention, you're connecting the dots back, like, well, that was something that they were trying to teach me in school, and I was like not paying attention to it, you know? So yeah, that's it.
Okay, I had to like reread the question back to me. What did I face as a first gen? I think the main one is in my engineering classes, there's like one other Hispanic girl in there, and I already knew her because she was in all the same classes as me, like as we go through. So I think part of it is like this imposter syndrome, but the bad part is when you indulge in it, you indulge in the imposter syndrome, and it becomes like a self-sabotaging, where I would say, oh, I'm not going to be able to do this, so I'm just going to put it off and procrastinate because I'm not going to understand it anyways. And then I give myself only like, the day before to learn it, and I'm like, oh shoot, I still have to complete this. And I'm like, oh, I could have possibly learned this if I gave myself more time. So I kind of like gave into like those like negative thoughts. Even like I would explode bad thoughts and make all the good things that happen like really tiny. Like I would be happy about like an Arduino project that we worked on in class, and then I remember I was talking to someone, asked a question about networking, and I was talking to some NASA engineer at a conference, and I was showing him my resume, and he's like, oh, you only worked on Arduino? Like my 10-year-old daughter works on Arduinos. And I'm just like, bruh, like, I'm sorry. I didn't know what an Arduino was when I was 10 years old. I learned it when I was freaking 18, 19. This is the best I can do right now. So that like, oh, my head exploded after like because I gave into like those negative thoughts. Whereas, that's like a very small instance that, I can blow off and say, okay, like I'm doing the best with what I can with what I've learned so far. So yeah, just navigating, trying to focus on the good and what you can do, and things that are out of your control, just, pay them no mind and focus on what you can do.
So Karina mentioned, we do have a question in the chat that I would like Veronica and Steven and then Karina, if you want to add to your response, is do you have any advice on how to go about networking and finding a job or internship in industry after graduating?
Yes. So I would say my experience, what I did, I say try to network as much as you can. A lot of the universities have alumni groups and they get together. So you can join that. I know there's LinkedIn and you probably heard of all that stuff. But more than anything, I would say try to get as competitive in your resume. And I think my tip for that would be like, I didn't get a chance to build my resume that well during college. So I did internships, unpaid internships after graduation. And I got some of those off of like Craigslist posts. And so, because at the same time, you're still applying. So the more competitive you look, the better. And when you go to the networking events, really try and talk to them. You also have professional chapters. Like I said, I joined SHEP, and SHEP also has a professional chapter in San Diego, so I joined that. And I think it's just practicing and getting yourself out there and writing it down. Write down like kind of what you want to say, like what they say, your elevator speech and kind of what you want to answer, and write down the examples, because that way it just comes out a little bit more naturally. And it's always awkward, so that's okay. And just get yourself out there. And like I said, for me, what really worked was those Craigslist internships. where I just went and I talked to them because they know someone and you're working with them. And when you go into the job work or your interview for your actual job, it's like, and I did all of this with all these industries. So that's kind of my tip.
Yeah, that's awesome. The put yourself out there part really resonates. And you know, the other thing I would try to make this, you know, simple, straightforward, right? Like you're looking for opportunity and you're passionate. I would just say go to ServiceNow.com and check out our careers site. We have an awesome, you know, program, you know, at our within the company. It's just amazing, and it's only getting better. So I would encourage, you know, you guys that are looking for opportunity to you know, hit the site up and check it out, and feel free to ping me on the side if I can help with anything. Barring that, you know, like you know, absolutely put yourself out there, you know, network. It's, you know, these things are, you know, a Google away from like finding a meetup or something that you're passionate about, and then just taking that leap, you know, just and then once you go to the event, you know, there's, I know for me, like, it might not seem like this, but I actually can be very introverted. And I would go to these meetups and I'd be like, just in the corner, you know, not saying anything. And then I do that 2 or 3 times and I go, you know what, I'm going to say hi to someone next time, you know, hey, how's it going? And, you know, you just build your confidence up and start, you know, with those interactions. And, you know, that's where some of the magic and some of the spark, you know, happens. So definitely, you know, networking, get, you know, do your research on some of the companies, you know, that you're working with, and try to find, you know, that spark, you know, for you, right? So hopefully, you know, ServiceNow would be a good place to start. I would say definitely trying to put that out there, but a lot of it, you know, ends up being like, yeah, you are, you know, you cast a wide net because you want to be open to where you're going to find your passion. So you want to talk to many people, right? Because you don't know where your spark, something that someone said to you in this, you know, interview or this meeting, you know, as opposed to what this, you know, what these folks were saying to you, that might make all the difference. So, you know, I think that's kind of some of the key advice I would give you guys is put yourself out there, go to servicenow.com. Done.
Good plug. I think for me, I have a couple bullet points in my head right now. The first is don't be afraid to apply to that job, like online, because I feel like interviews, I guess that's like off topic, but the more interviews you can kind of get under your belt, it doesn't matter if you get them or not, but the experience, like interviewing is a skill. So the more you practice, the better you're going to be at explaining your resume, answering questions, like staying calm when you talk about yourself. And then my other one is the life hack basically is that recruiters are people too. So you can try to find things that you have in common with them, and then you befriend them, and then they'll be asking for your resume instead of you asking for them to see it. Because as part of SHIP, what I would see is my friends would get lunch with the recruiters that would come to like the GBMs or would sponsor an event. They would like go and get lunch. I'm like, oh, and then somehow, some way they end up working there like that summer or in the fall. And I'm like, wow, like, because once you see the recruiter and the recruiter knows who you are, that you're personable, but you also get stuff done, let's say like at a hackathon, then they're gonna say, oh, this person is a good fit for the company. And they're gonna be like, oh, where do you want to work? And they're like, how do we get you to this company? So remember that recruiters are people, and try to kind of meet them in the middle instead of trying to like bring them to you, you know? That's what I would say.
I want to highlight one of the comments that is in the chat by William Dyer, the director of the Corporate Affiliates Program. I want to give a shout out to the Corporate Affiliates Program for helping out get some of our panelists. So you did mention that all of these panelists represent a company that is part of the Jacob School Corporate Affiliates Program, and they can help you connect with these employers directly. And so he did put in the chat the link to their website. And then, and then, so our next question actually was sent to me through private messages. Have any of you considered getting a master's, or do you already have a master's or a PhD in engineering? And Veronica, we'll start with you.
There, I was like, I had a hard time with my mute button.
Oh, yeah.
Initially, I did not want to. I just kind of wanted to go straight to the workforce because I wasn't really sure what I wanted my master's in. So I kind of wanted to work first and see, like, do I still like what I did in my bachelor's? Do I want to change it? Once I got into solar, I gave myself a couple of years, and I noticed for what I like, the company does a very good job of doing like individual certifications. Like if you need to be a specialist in something, a technician in something, if you really want to dive in, they have the resources. So I kind of stayed with that. I've been trying to do that first, and so far I've been getting what I want out of it. I've been able to grow in my company. I'm able to move easily. I don't feel that I cannot move because I don't have a master's. So I haven't considered going at this time for those reasons.
Yeah, I mean, pretty similar. Like I think earlier in my like career and just getting started, it's just something where I was like, oh yeah, I'm probably going to end up doing that. And then, life happened and that sort of thing. So I just, haven't gotten to that point where I, pursued that. I will say though, it's, follow your passion around these things, like, deeper levels of knowledge on particular areas of your industry or your, background could be, beneficial. And so, find out for your career and what you got going on, if it makes sense. It is something that you definitely want to evaluate, but it's not necessarily a slam dunk for everyone, right? My wife, she has her master's and she holds it up over me all the time. Hey, I got one, and I'm like, oh, that looks pretty cool, But we're in different fields and we're doing different things, and so just something to evaluate and to consider, and it's something that depending on where you're at and what you're trying to do, it could make a lot of sense for you. So I didn't follow that, myself, but it is something that I did evaluate, and I did consider doing that. So.
And as for me, I didn't want to go to master's because I wanted a job. I wanted to pay my own bills, and yeah. But for me right now, my career, because I graduated in electrical engineering, and right now I work more in like software. So I am taking like a certification program at UCSD Extension to get certified in like C++ programming, because I did take a couple coding classes as part of EE, but they were like more scripting, so I don't really know the foundations. So luckily Cubic is like paying for my classes and my certificate. So I am still like learning, and it's like helping me in my career. So I don't think a master's would help me as much right now in like what I need. But yeah, and it's just more manageable because it's only one class at a time, and I still have to work my 40 hours a week. So this is like a good in between for now, like taking my certification program.
Thank you. And then for the next question is, what is your advice to first-gen engineering college students interested in working in industry? Veronica.
So my advice is, in general, just don't be afraid to ask for help. And the faster you do it, the better. If that's anything, if that's within your classes, if that's office hours, if that's like going to counseling, whatever you need, the faster you do it, the better. And that's something I wish I would have learned a little quicker. And I think it would have been my experience a little better. The other thing is make sure you make your groups, your networks within your classmates or older classmates. And like Karina said, even they know someone and they know someone and they might be hiring somewhere. So they always say network builds wealth. So try to get that going. And the last thing I would say is I thought that everything, like once you got your diploma, I thought that was it. You were set for life. And it was kind of like, no, companies do look at GPAs. I did not know that initially when I went in as a freshman. So the companies do look at GPAs. They do look at your resume. They do look at your work if you have internships or co-ops. So try to get that in. And at the end of the day, it just gives you more options. That doesn't mean that you're not going to find a job. It just means that it's a little easier and you have more options and easier to find your passion. And then for your industry, once you figure out what you like, what you want, you have to keep applying and applying and applying. For solar, I think I ended up applying like 5 times until I got in. But I really wanted to be at solar. So I was okay with it. I was like, all right, I mean, I'll just, another position open, I'm going to go in because that's where I wanted to be. And that's where I'm at now. And I love my life. So it's working out.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, getting in the industry, right? I mean, my advice would be to be curious about, the industry, whether it's like in the medical field, health, software, research these things, pull up different articles, spend some time, looking at that and asking questions and creating those connections with people who are experts, in those fields that are comfortable, investing some time in you, right? And when you make those when you try to create those interactions, you won't land every single one of them. So you have to be comfortable that like, hey, I'm trying to make this connection. Maybe it's not there, but I would say don't give up on those things. And so part of that, like being curious, is like trying to build a muscle, right, about being strategic, right? Because it is, when you're in the field and you're working and your responsibility is to deliver for a company, the more you know about that industry and that space, the better off you're going to be. And you also make people around you better, right? Like, do you go to conferences? Do you ask, why our customers want to do this, or what is this line of business about? Those are the types of things that will separate you from everyone else, where you're like, hey, maybe we've been talking earlier about like some of the things, the challenges that we've had to go through to get to where we're at. And there are some other things that we can do to break that mold and to catch up or to get ahead for ourselves. And I think, you're hearing from a lot of us here about how we've done that. And I think for me, some of that is like just being really curious about the industries that I'm working with, or I just read a lot of articles, try to understand, at a deeper level, what this company is about or what this industry is about and why this is a challenge for them, and try to connect the dots when you're, interacting with companies, right? And you're able to operate and elevate the conversation a little bit more. And it takes practice, right? We've been talking about that. Like, you don't just show up and everything's just magic all the time. I walk around, my daughter teases me because like I'll walk around when I'm preparing for, a presentation or something, and I'll just be walking around the house kind of like talking out like, hey, I'm gonna do this and that. Like this is, but it's practice. You practice at these things, your communication, how you articulate things, you kind of practice at it. And I think, the industry that you're in is no different, right? You practice, you learn, you research, and you try to retain that information. So you might have to read it 3 to 4 or 5 times to process it and understand it. But that stuff pays off. It makes a difference, and it builds a muscle that even if that thing is not, the one that will pay off, you're building the muscle that you practice, you have persistence, right? I think that's the muscle that we're trying to build
Yeah, definitely. It's when you go into a new job, you're not gonna know what the heck you're gonna be doing there because every company is different. Every company has their own culture, systems, communication skills, how everything works. But you just have to be confident in yourself that you're gonna adapt and you're gonna pick it up with time, with like with some you're gonna make some mistakes and you're gonna learn and those are your lessons. Because I remember when like I was a new intern at Cubic and I like my boss would ask me for something and I was like, I think this is it. And I'm just like here and then I'm like shaking and he's like, did you do it? Did you figure it out? I was like, yeah. And he's like, so why are you like shaking and nervous? And I'm like, I don't know, because I just didn't believe in myself. But it's like if you do the work and you like verify your work, then you can be confident in yourself and just be yourself and give your facts. And there was another thing and it just left me. 1 second. Yeah, it left me, so sorry.
As we wrap up, for our attendees, feel free to ask any last questions that you have. I just have one more question for them and then we'll be done. So any parting thoughts for our panelists, from our panelists, and then any questions you have, put them in the chat. So Veronica.
So it's scary, but everybody feels scared. You're not the only one. We're all here. There's always all these resources. You guys can reach out and talk to any of us here, and but it's gonna be okay. Everything at the end of the day, as long as you put effort and time to it, it's gonna be okay. And try to understand what works for you, what you need. Everybody's different. It could be something as simple as like maybe you just need someone that made it in your industry and be like, okay, they made it, I can make it. Maybe that means that day you need extra chocolate that day, but it's okay. We all have our ups and downs. You got to believe in yourself. And, now I tell myself this all the time. When I was in elementary school and you play like kickball or baseball or whatever, and you were captain, you would pick the kids that would make you win in the team, right? So that's the same in the industry. They're going to pick the best. So they're not going to care if you speak perfect English, if you're tall or short, if you're a boy or a girl. So as long as you try really hard and you put your effort, you're going to be in the team. And so don't let all the other stuff get to you. So.
Yeah. Parting advice. I'd probably say, trying to dig deep and find your motivation and your passion is something that will just propel you forward, even when, things are difficult for you. And then, maybe some other like advice is like that risk, just, that ability and that willingness to take risk. Like history rewards the risk takers, right? And so, if it's you're the first person, in your family to go to school, you're the first person to try this thing out. You're the, that being a pioneer, of this stuff is something to be proud of, not something that we want to be ashamed of, right? For trying something new and taking a risk. I think, history rewards that and we become more resilient. And it leads to a lot of positive outcomes. And then maybe the other thing I would say is enjoy the journey, like enjoy this stuff. Like when I do tons and tons of interviews, right, in my role, and when I'm interviewing some of the more junior roles for the company, I always have to remind the candidates, like, this is literally one of the most exciting times of your life right now. Enjoy it. This is like you're in a good spot. The economy, like you have your whole life in front of you and you can shape it and carve it however you want, and it's your oyster. So like just enjoy the journey, and even though that you have those challenges, like relish in that, and you know, when you surpass it, you're like, you know, reward yourself and pat yourself on the back, you know, even if there's no one behind you to pat you on the back, right? Like, you got to be your biggest supporter. So enjoy the journey. I think it's super critical to do that, even in the difficult times. Like, take a pause, collect your thoughts, and enjoy, you know, enjoy it.
Beautiful. I feel so good right now after you guys. I'm like, yeah. Made it. No, I think you guys like got all the good points. But I would just say that challenges give you character. That all these, you know, all these struggles that you're going through is what are part of your story. Of that's what makes you unique. Of like, everyone is on their own path, but where you're at right now, the challenge you're met with is like, that's your challenge, and you're gonna make it through. Because I remember so many, like, I had like a breakdown like every quarter, and I'm still here. I'm made it through the outside, but all those challenges make you like, are challenging your, show you how resilient you are. And just, I don't know, they took all the good points. So I'm just like, oh, you guys nailed it on the head. So yeah, that you make it through, and that you're gonna have good stories at the end of it.
I know we gave our parting thought. There's one last question that came in, as we'll end on that question. Thank you all for your parting thought. When applying to jobs, were your grades in undergrad, did they move you forward or stop you from certain positions? So if anyone can share a little bit more about this.
The question was about your grades, and did it help you or hurt you? Is that the question?
Yes. So
I'll take a stab at that one. I've had, you know, when earlier in my career, I've had jobs where, you know, the GPA was like super critical, super important, and like, you can't get in the door without, you know, this magnificent GPA. I think the industry is evolving a little bit more around these things. And then I think when you're in the technical and engineering space, I generally don't pay that much attention to that, because I think I'm looking more for capabilities and what you can do. And yeah, is GPA one way that people have shown that they're motivated and they have a desire? Yes, in some cases, but you know, when I think about myself, my GPA wasn't the highest. You know, but like, I feel like I've succeeded, right? So it's not the only thing that I want to be evaluating people on. When I'm looking for, you know, a lot of other characteristics about people, and that stick it to itness. And yeah, maybe, you know, maybe the first several years were a struggle for you, and your GPA shows it, but it's not going to predict all of your future and your success, right? So I'm very conscious of that, you know, when I'm being the hiring manager on things, and not trying to hold people back because, you know, they had a setback in their life, right? But I've seen some companies hold that up and say, hey, this has to be the highest thing and you can't get in. And so, you know, you get, you know, the great part about this is we get to choose where we work and who we want to work with, right? It's like you're being interviewed, but you're also interviewing the people that you want to work with. And I think, you know, later on, I mean, it didn't hit me when I was first doing it, but I started deciding who I wanted to work with, right? Like, I got to a point where at first I was like, oh, I just want to get a job in this field and I'd be lucky to have this. And it got to a point where it's like, I'd interview and I'm like, they offer me a job and I'm like, I'm not taking that job. Like, I don't want this for myself, right? We're not a match. We're not hitting it off, you know? And so, you know, GPA is you know, I think that is evolving. And so, you know, let that play a, you know, hopefully not a great factor. Unless you have a really good one, then that's great. But if you don't, I don't want you to be discouraged by the fact that you don't, because in the engineering field in particular, like, if you work hard and you put the time in, you know, then you're good. Like, that's what we want. We want people that don't quit, you know, and don't give up on these things. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on that.
And yeah, to add on to that, yeah, it is discouraging if you don't meet these GPA requirements, because I didn't have the highest GPA. So I think it because you want to do research, you want to do all these opportunities, and it's like it's just an easy way to filter out people. Like, these people are good at these classes, but it doesn't tell you anything else about them. So I think it does make it harder maybe on your first internship or your first entry job. But then after that, if it's going to be harder in the beginning, but then after you get your like first good experience, you're going to have something to talk about and your experience to show for it, and it'll be easier to navigate from there. So it's more work in the beginning and then hopefully more smooth sailing.
Yeah, and so exactly like Stephen and Karina, it is, like Karina said, a little bit discouraging, because most of them, at least when I was applying, were still online application, and it was like, do you meet the GPA requirement, yes or no? And so it does get kind of discouraging. But I would suggest, I also didn't have the highest GPA, and like the bigger companies tend to have a higher requirement. And so what I've noticed is if you go to smaller companies, they don't weigh that as big. So maybe you can try that to get your foot in the door. What I did, because I didn't have my GPA was so strong, I made my resume strong. And that's when I started looking for all the internships. And I was like, I don't care if you pay me or not, I'm building this. So at least that was my way to offset. It's like, okay, fine, I might not have a GPA, but look, I can prove it this other way, that I can work and I can do all this stuff. I like intern in National City Engineering Department, and I did aerospace, and I was doing like modeling for the city for CAD, but it showed that I can do the work, and that was my way of doing it. And then when I went to my interview, I even took recommendation letters with me. I was like, I want this job. And so it was kind of funny, because years after, the manager that hired me, he told me, it's like, I can tell you really wanted this. It's like, that's one of the reasons why we hired you. And I was like, okay. So don't be discouraged. There's always a way, there's always a backdoor, and find that backdoor. If that means your first 2 years, you start in a smaller company and it could be good for you. You can find what you'd really like. And then from there, you could do the next step. But there's always a way to get into your passion.
Thank you all so much for coming. I know it is now 5 o'clock. So again, thank you to our awesome panelists. Today's webinar was recorded and it will be posted on the Idea Center YouTube channel. Feel free to follow up if you want to get connected. I know Will had dropped in the chat how to get in contact with the companies as well. So thank you all again. And then I'll make sure, Steven, Veronica, and Karina, that I share the YouTube link when it is posted. Thank you all so much. Bye.